Hello everyone, my name is Carl, and in this video I'm going to show you how my VR sword system works and how you can get the most out of all the blueprints that are included in the system. So when you first open up the project, this is what you'll see. So this is just the main menu that links to the other demos that I have made. So for this tutorial, let us head into VR swords, maps, and you'll find a map showroom. Let's open up that. Cool, so this level has a bunch of open space that we can play around in, and it also has a bunch of information that tell you about the swords when you are using the packaged demo. So this is the pawn that we're using. It has holsters attached already, and I put two swords in the holsters, and the holster will allow you to put swords on your waist and behind your back as well. So let me quickly show you how that works. If we hit play and we head into VR quickly, now we are here, and you'll see the swords around my waist, and I can move around and they will come with me. And if I want to draw one, I can just reach down. And if I want to put them away again, I can just put them on my hips. And this works behind your back as well. If I want to grab one of these, I can just put it behind my back and walk around and do stuff, whatever you're going to do in your game. And then when you need your sword, you can just reach back and pull it out again as well. Cool, so that is the holster. And if you want to customize that, you can open up your VR pawn and you'll see there's a holster child actor. So if you want to fine tune the placement of that, you can do that in here. And it also shows you how you can add the holster as a child actor to your custom VR pawn if you're using a different pawn. But if you're using this project as a template to start your game, everything will work perfectly out of the box. So let's just move this over a bit. There we go, so we can have some space to work with. So let me show you quickly how the blueprint swords work. So if you head into blueprints, you'll see there's a bunch of different swords. There's the holster blueprint, and there's the slice mesh blueprint as well. So let's just quickly place a sword into the world for us to use. And by default, these swords will simulate physics as soon as play starts. So if we hit simulate now, you'll see the sword falls to the floor. And that could be a nice way to, if you want to put it on a table or have it lay somewhere, it's easy to place it because you can just place it on top of the table or a little bit above the table, and as soon as play starts, it will just fall to the table and it will lie on the table, ready for the player to pick up. But in this case, we want it to hang in the air until the player comes and picks it up. So we can look at the blueprint settings here, and you'll see under mechanics, you'll see a simulate physics at start. So we can disable that. And now if we simulate physics, it'll hang in the air until the player picks it up. If the player then drops it again, it'll fall and you can throw it around and it'll behave like a normal physics actor. So let us go through these settings one by one. Firstly, you'll see min slice speed. Now, in real life, if you've got a sword or a knife and you're trying to chop something, if you move too slowly, it'll just push it out of the way. And that is what this min slice speed is trying to simulate. So this tells the blueprint how fast the sword needs to be swung before it can slice through a slice actor. So let us put a slice mesh into the world as well. By default, it just has this cube, but in its settings, you can change the mesh to anything else as well. We'll look into that a little bit later. So there's our sword, there's our mesh. Now if we hit play VR preview, cool, we'll see our sword over there. We can reach and pick it up. And if we are moving slowly, or if we hit it with the side of the sword, it will do nothing. But if we move fast enough, you'll start to hear the swish sound coming through. And that means it's ready to slice. So if you want to see how fast you need to be able to move it, if you want to fine tune that min slice speed value, you can just swing the sword and listen for the swish. And if we go too slowly, it'll just knock it out of the way. Or if we hit it with the side of the sword, it won't slice either. So the swords are set up to behave much like actual swords in real life. And if you're skilled enough, you can even throw it and slice things while it's flying through the air. Cool. So that is the min slice speed setting. If you push this down, it'll start slicing while the sword is still moving much slower. And if you want the player to really need to swing the sword hard, you can push this up. And you can just play with this value and find a value that feels nice. I found 15 feels nice, so I'm going to use that. Snap to hand position is enabled by default, and all of these are commented out as well, so you can read the stuff there, but I'll show you quickly. Let's say you have some reason for the player to just pick up the sword and look at it. So let's say you have a little store where the player can look at the swords, and you don't want the sword to snap to their hand automatically in that situation. So this one will be snap to hand position enabled, and this one will have snap to hand position disabled. So let me show you what that does. So this one snaps to your hand and it'll go into your hand and sit in a natural way in the hand. But this one doesn't have that enabled. Let's put this in my holster, grab this one. So this one will attach to your hand, but it won't snap. And that makes it nice if you want to examine the hilt and stuff like that. An example I can think of is, let's say you've got a store or a shop in your game and you want to look at this and you go, okay, cool, I want to buy that, and you put it on your buy thing and then it buys it and then it goes into your holster, a version that actually snaps. And these swords are also set up so that if you grab it in this orientation, it'll point upwards, but if you want to grab it in this orientation, you can have it like this as well. And the slicing works in either setup. And if you can catch, that's even better. Okie dokie. Next thing, simulate physics at start. We looked at that already. That just makes the swords hang in the air or fall down from the beginning. Okay, so the next thing says start holstered. And that means it'll attach to the holster if you stick it in the holster before the play begins. So let's do that quickly. Let's grab one of these other ones. Let's grab a scimitar. So if we say start holstered and we place it in the player's holster somewhere like this. Now it should attach to the holster when play starts. So if we start playing, cool. So now the sword is in my holster when I begin, and you can just play around with that placement to get it in the position that you want it when play starts. Cool, so that felt a bit low when we started, so let's just move that up a bit. There we go. Cool. Next setting. Can hold inverted. Okay, that is what I showed you earlier. Let's do it with these two. I'm just going to set this one to snap to hand position again, and I'm going to set that one to disable can hold inverted. Cool, so that now allows us, if we pick up these swords in this orientation, you can hold them with a point pointing upwards like this. But if we want to hold them facing with the point facing downwards, this one has can hold inverted enabled, but this one will snap to your hand so that it's always upright. So you can fight like this if you want. Slice, 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 block, chop, block, chop. Cool, and the next setting is more for if you want to customize your sword's mesh. So you can adjust the center of mass offset. So this little sphere here shows you where the center of mass of the sword is. So if you want to balance the sword on your hand or on a ledge or anything, it'll balance right on that sphere. And you'll see if we adjust this, the sphere moves up and down of the selected sword. So if you want to customize the balance of the sword, you can adjust this. You feel the effect of this a lot when you throw the sword. If the center of mass is too far forward, the sword will fly out of your hand much faster than when it is set backwards. And if it's too far back, you'll struggle to get a nice throw on the sword. So if you want to play with that, you're welcome to. But like I said, it's set up to be fairly accurate to where the actual balance point of the sword should be. So it feels quite natural. And then if you've got weird shapes of swords, you can adjust the X offset of the center of mass as well. And like I said, that's mostly for if you're using custom meshes for your sword. Cool. So each of the swords also has a look variation. So this is the default look for the knight sword, or the arming sword as it's called. Let's just enable that back. And let's change the look of this one to variation 2. Let's make a copy of this one. Hold Alt to make a copy of that one. And let's make this one, set the age. You can adjust the age with a slider from 0 to 1 to add some damage to the sword and make it look a bit older. And sometimes it's cool to just add a little bit just to make the sword feel like it's been used in your world. So let's have a quick look at that. Okay, cool. So we've got 2 arming swords of the first variation, a brand new one, and then one that has been used a bit. And you can even adjust the minimum slice speed of this one so that you need to slice it a bit harder before it'll actually slice the meshes, if that's something you would want to do to show that it's a bit dull. Cool, and this is then the second variation. This one has a Damascus steel look with bronze accessories. So there you can see it. And to show you that balance point was about there. You'll see it balances just about there. Swish sound. This is the swish sound that plays when you swing the sword fast enough to activate slicing. And there are sounds included for this, but you can add your own sounds if you want to have different sounds playing when that happens. And there you've just got your volume and pitch multiplier settings as well. Okay, hand position. This is especially useful if you're using hands that are different from the default hands, or that are different sizes or shapes maybe. If you activate show hand reference, let's just reset the rotation of the sword so it's easier to see. Cool. So there you can see how it's going to sit in the hand. And from this, if you wanted to set a bit lower or higher, you can make adjustments over here. So let's set the offset on the Y. No, let's leave that alone. Let's set the offset on the X and Z. So if you want your player to hold the sword more to the back for some reason, you can do that. You can adjust the rotation as well. So you can really customize this to hold the sword in any way that you want. So let's just have a look. Cool. And as you can see, the sword reference hand and everything is hidden in game, so you don't have to worry about that. So if we grab this one now, you'll see it is being held differently from the other one. And the inverted is wrong now, but you can make adjustments to the inverted as well. I'll show you that just now. So if we make adjustments like this, we just need to show flipped reference as well, just to make sure that the flipped reference is working as intended as well. So let's just move that to there maybe. Oh, don't want to move the Y, we want to move the Z. There we go. So now that should be good. Cool, so there's the normal orientation, and if you hold it flipped, then that's working now as well. We can maybe adjust the Y location to not clip through the hand like that as well, or we can adjust the angle of the sword a bit. But you can play around with that. Okie dokie. So let's disable show hand reference, and then we've got slice plane settings. Now when you swing the sword, the slice plane is the thing that's actually doing the slicing. And if we say show slice plane, there's your slice plane. So you can adjust this, and this is especially useful when you want to adjust the shape to fit a custom sword that you may be using. So you can adjust the width, the length, and then also the rotation. Just set that back. Cool. And that is the main settings for the swords. you'll see there are two custom swords as well, sword one-handed and sword two-handed, custom sword one-handed and two-handed. And for them I just added a little wooden sword model just to show that it's a custom thing and not something that's actually supposed to be used. But if you want to use it, you're welcome to. Cool. So you'll see there are one-handed and two-handed swords. And at the moment, the Assassin's Straight Sword, the Claymore, and the Katana can be held one-handed or two-handed. And then, of course, the custom two-handed sword as well. So if we add one of those into our game, let's just disable start physics. Cool. Let's have a quick look at that. Cool. So the one-handed sword, like this one, if you grab it with another hand, it just jumps to your new hand, basically, which makes it easy to switch from one hand to the other. But the two-handed ones, if you grab it with a second hand now, it'll attach that hand to your sword as well. And you can hold it two-handed. And for instance, an example that I can think of for a game then is, let's say you're fighting with these swords, it can produce a certain amount of damage when you hit an enemy. Or if you're holding it two-handed, then your hits can do more damage if you want to make it do that. So if you want anything to be affected by the fact that the player is holding it with one or with two hands, you can get that information by looking in the blueprint. You'll see there's a has second hand Boolean variable. So if that is true, it means the sword is being held with two hands, and if it's only being held with one hand or no hands, it's going to be false. So you can have a damage multiplier that is affected by this value if you want to do something like that. So for the custom swords, you'll see there's a custom sword mesh. And there you can add any sword mesh that you have into your blueprint. So let's have a quick look. I don't have any custom meshes in here now, but we can use anything. So we can, let's say we want to use a string of sausages. That'll work. So we can put that in there. Okay, so you'll see the sausage mesh is pointing downwards, whereas the swords are pointing upwards. And that can cause a bit of a problem. So if you're using custom meshes, just make sure that they are pointing upwards with the origin centered around the guard of the sword. So let's have a quick look at that. If we go into meshes, here are all our sword meshes. We drag one of those into the world. We can see that's a good orientation for it to have. So what we can do is grab the mesh that we have that is not working properly. And if you have access to the source files and you can change that in your 3D software, that is perfect. But if you don't, there's a way we can change that as well. So let's do this. Flip it around. Cool. Flip it around, and then what we can do is set that to 0, 0, 0. And we can look at that. Now let's just hit Alt 3 to make it unlit. So now it's at world 0. And that is something that we can use because we can go to the developer tools, merge actors, and then there's an option here to set the pivot point at 0. So if we click that, move that up a tiny bit and hit merge actors. Now we can have a new sword, let's say sausage sword. Let's call it SM static mesh sausage sword. Save. Close that. Now we've got a sausage sword. And if we head back, let's hit Alt 4 to be in lit mode again. If we select our sword now, click on sausage sword and assign that as a custom mesh. Ooh, now that's looking much better. So now we can just set up the hand positioning. Oh, quite like that already. We can just make sure that the slice plane is working well as well. So you can see it's a bit short, so we can just adjust the length up to there. And you can obviously play around with the center of mass as well. It feels like this will be have a center of mass that's a bit more forward. So let's do that quickly. Center of mass offset. Do it around there. Should be fine for now. Okay, so let us play and see if that works. Okay, let me just get rid of that. Here we've got our sausage sword now. Hoi! That works perfectly. In this situation, if you don't want your sword to be able to slice at all because it's made of sausages, you can turn up the min slice speed to something like 200. And that should make it impossible for the player to actually swing the sword fast enough for the sausages to slice a mesh. So if we look at that now, you'll hear it doesn't make a swishing sound, which means it doesn't slice. It just hits. Cool. So that's the way you can disable slicing of the sword. But what makes that feel weird is when you swing it around and it doesn't make a little sound. So let's put that back and see if we can just edit the blueprint. So if you want your object to still make the swishing sound when you swing it, but if you're using something like a club or a bat or anything that you don't want to actually slice, you can just come into the blueprint over here and you'll see this assigns the needed tags for slicing. You can just alt click on that to disconnect that, and then also just above that you'll see where it checks whether the sword is being swung faster than the min slice speed, and then it sets the can slice variable to true. Oops. And then also when it's slicing, it disables the collision of the sword mesh itself, and that is done over here. So if you still want the sword or the club that you're making to be able to hit the object, you can just set both of these to collision enabled. And again, it's maybe a good idea to make a copy of this blueprint and then make your changes within that copy so you still have the original to go back to. So now we can pick it up. It makes a sound when you swing it. But even if it's swung fast enough, it will never slice your slice objects. Cool, and in the same way you can adjust the settings for the custom two-handed sword. It just works as a two-handed sword then. Cool, let's look at the slice mesh quickly. The slice mesh is designed to be able to accept any mesh and it'll make it a sliceable mesh basically. So let's look at some of the meshes that we have in our demo folder. Let's choose this pickle. So something you just need to make sure about when you are slicing, using something as a mesh that can be sliced, as a procedural mesh, just open up your static mesh, and in the details panel over here, you can just search for CPU. And by default, this is disabled, so you need to set allow CPU access. You need to set that to true, save, and now your mesh will be able to be sliced. Cool, so let us click on the pickle, click there, custom mesh. Scale that up a bit, let's make it 5. And then you'll see a few other settings here as well. The custom cap material is the material that will be applied to the inside where the mesh has been sliced. Custom material, you can assign any material to that. For this instance, I've got a pickle material that is applied to the external part of the pickle, actually, that's wrapped around the pickle. That's why you'll see these weird little artifacts where it's outside of the UV map. And then I also made a pickle inside. This is usually good to have a tileable material. So for the inside of the pickle, we want to use this inside. So we can go to custom cap material and assign that. Physics material override. This is where you can set your material. If you want to make a different physics material for your objects to be more bouncy or less bouncy or whatever, you can make a custom physics material and then just apply that over here. Cool. So let's look at these settings quickly. There's a slice sound. That's a sound that is played when the object is sliced. And if you have custom sounds for that, you can assign that in there as well. Keep main body static. So if we, by default, if you put this there and you hit play or simulate, it'll fall to the ground. Cool. if we say keep main body static, now it'll hang in the air, and that is good if you want to attach it to a wall or have it stick out of the floor like a pole that's supposed to be planted in the floor. So let's say our pickle is planted in the floor. If we don't enable that and we stick it in the floor like that, it'll just fall over. But if we say keep main body static, it'll stay like that. Even if you slice parts of it off. Let me show you quickly. Let's grab our sword. And there you'll see that's the inside material that we assigned. And we can slice pieces off this, and the main part will stay planted in the ground as long as you do this. These weird little edges you see is just the outline mesh that I made for this specific stylized look of the pickle that I wanted for the demo. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Let's just reset the rotation, move that up a tiny bit, make a copy of it. Below the keep main body static, you'll see a main body location, and you can set that to top or bottom. This one is going to be set to bottom, and this one we're going to set to top. So what that means is if you slice this object now, the main body will be held in place, and this sets where that main body is located. So if we slice this one, the top piece will stay in place and the bottom will fall off. And if we slice this one, the top piece will fall off, but the bottom will stay in place. So let's have a quick look at that. So if we slice them like that, you see that's what the difference is. Cool. So this is useful if you wanted to come out of a ceiling, and this is useful when you wanted to come out of the ground and stay static. Okay, the kill delay is by default set to 0, and that means all the pieces will stay alive indefinitely. If we set that to a value, and this is in seconds, so if we set that to 2, that means if we slice a piece off this, the whole actor will be destroyed after 2 seconds. So this one has a kill delay of 0, which means it'll just stay alive forever. But that one has a kill delay of 2. So if we slice that, 0, 1, 2, it's dead. So that helps a lot with performance. If you've got a lot of meshes that are being sliced and all the little tiny bits is causing performance issues, you can make that so that when you slice the object, it gets sliced and then it gets destroyed after a certain amount of time. Cool. With this kill delay, you can set always keep main part alive. Let's just make that a bit larger. Always keep main part alive. So if that is enabled, you can probably guess that the main part will not be destroyed after 2 seconds. So let's make that 1 second. Let's delete this one and move this one over a bit. Cool. So now if you slice a piece off, it'll be destroyed after 1 second, but the main body stays alive, and you can keep slicing off pieces. And then we've got a setting that says can be picked up, and that obviously just allows the player to pick up or not pick up the object with their hands as well. Slice impulse radius and slice impulse strength, that is the impulse that is triggered when the object is sliced. In different situations, you may want to make it so that when you slice the object, the parts are blown apart quite violently. So in that case, you can up the impulse strength or impulse radius. And then also if you have long objects, sometimes the impulse radius needs to be a bit larger. So if you activate the debug impulse sphere, it'll generate a debug sphere while you're playing so that you can see where that force is being applied and how large the radius of the force is that is being applied when you slice the object. So let's set this to bottom again quickly. And then let's just look at that. Cool. So if we slice this, you'll see that's the sphere. At the moment, it's quite large. And that's why this piece is bouncing off like that. So if we go and we make, I think we can leave the size at 100 and we make the impulse strength 0. Let's have a look at what happens then. See, now it gets sliced, but it's not shot off at all. That just slid off. And if we make it larger, let's make it 1000. Now you'll see it gets flung away quite violently. So you can play around with the specific object that it's supposed to be and play around with those settings until it feels natural. Okay, and finally, let's look at the holster blueprint that we have. If you attach that to an actor, it'll automatically add a back mesh and a hips mesh to the holster. But you can also use that as a fixed mount in the world. So if you drag that into the world, you'll see it's just a cube that we can scale and move around. And you've got the same settings over here. You can use a custom belt mesh, custom back mesh. That is just affecting it when it's attached to the player. But you can still select to not make it transparent, or if it's transparent, you can set the opacity to something that you want. So you can even set it to 0 and then use a custom mesh that you just drag into the world like this if you want. So we can set that over there just to see where it's going to go. So now that becomes our stabby block holster fixed mount thing. And we can set that to make transparent. Have that set to 0, then it will be completely invisible in the game. And if you look at that, now you should be able to put your swords in there and they'll stay like that, or mount them on the wall like so. And one more thing, if you're attaching the holster to your pawn, let's open up your pawn blueprint. There you can see we attached the holster as a child actor. If you go into the child actor settings, you can also say make transparent or not, and that's helpful when you want to fine-tune the placement of it. So if we go into the game now, you can see where the holsters are exactly. And then if you're using custom meshes for your belts and stuff, you can attach them here, or you can just attach them here, custom belt mesh. Let's go to our meshes real quick. Let us select the Canon. So now it makes your custom belt mesh. And obviously if you have a actual custom belt mesh for your character, then that'll work well there. Or another thing you can do is just make them transparent and make them completely transparent, and then just add a new static mesh to your pawn that'll be used as your belt. Awesome, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I'll put links down below to the store page and to other tutorials, including one that shows you how you can move this system into an existing project that you're working on as well. Thanks for your support.